Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance. In this resistance video, sponsored by contribution from Anonymous, and here's her story. Hi, Ollie. I made a contribution before writing this. Your channel has helped me in more ways than you know. It's helped me so much listening to other stories that I would like to share my own story of the abuse I endured from my narcissistic dad. My story is also sort of a success story that involved the hard decision of going no contact. So I'd like your viewers to know that there is hope for breaking the cycle from narcissistic abuse and happiness in their lives, and in the continuation of yours and in the lives that you are reaching through your channel. It just takes time and a lot of perseverance on our part to move towards our independence. Ollie, whatever your comments you stop to make, I can assure you I've had the same repeated thoughts myself as a kid and constantly question my surroundings. Whatever you say, I've already thought of it. I have to hand it to you. These people are so ridiculous in the lies and malice they spread, aren't they? This is long. Bear with me. As a person who is stressed out even by my own empathy towards others, it was definitely something he preyed upon. And once I became the scapegoat when I was older, life became hell. Despite all of this, I'm still incredibly compassionate towards the suffering of others and want to help everyone as much as I possibly can. I have to be careful, though, in this kind of world that we all live in. I am so introverted about it and try to be wise about practicing compassionate detachment and assessing whether someone is just stressed out, and then to give them the benefit of the doubt or just them really being an asshole. I had a partially normal childhood. My parents both served in the military at points in their lives, so up to about 6 years old, after this age things were progressively worse, I had the life of mostly normal military brat, moving around to wherever we were stationed. Note, Dad was in the military, but his job was non-combat related, so his issues aren't related to battle or PTSD or anything of that sort. My mother, though she is not without her own issues, is a wonderful woman, and looking back on things now, I can see that she did the best she could as a parent with being married to my dad and divorcing him with our best interests in mind. Although as a child I didn't understand it at the time, and eventually had to work through all that anger and confusion. My grandparents were also heavily involved in my upbringing, especially after my dad retired from the military, so I'm very grateful for my mother and for them for having that as a child. Despite this, things he said to me with his abuse were always done when others weren't around. He was mostly verbally abusive and screamed at me or said the exact same awful things, just in a low, quiet, whispery way. It sounds so strange typing it like that, but that's exactly what it was. Although I only had one instance, he hit me across the face really hard out of his own anger. Even one time too many. So for those of you who had to also endure constant physical abuse, my heart really goes out to you. Just know that no matter how many times they try to make it look like you were somehow responsible, this shit is never your fault. Never, never, never. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but even the choir needs to be reminded every now and then. It's on them. It's their own fucking problems that they need to deal with. You're their punching bag, literally or not. This is not your weight. As a young child, it was apparently he had anger issues. But at the beginning, I was just a young, dependent toddler who had nothing yet to contribute to his narcissistic supply. He had a fit of anger that I do remember at 3 years of age, in which he threw a dish at the wall and the whole thing was shattered across the floor, and my mom was just there listening to his berating of her. He always did it towards her and me, the daughter, in this low, hushed tone. He always knew how to take all his criticisms and insecurities about himself and make it seem like you did something, or you weren't measuring up enough. And then he played everything cool like he was a loving parent, and then went right back to it the next day. So my question about him is, because what he sounds like, as I question what his relationship was like, what his upbringing was, what his relationship like with his mother, because it sounds like he's a son husband, and it sounds like he's another possible male borderline who hates women, hates his wife, hates his daughter because they're not his mommy. Over and over and over, for years as a teenager, on visitation with him over the summer, he would call me toxic like my mom. In sports, at the few events he did make during my race, he ran alongside me, yelled at me, telling me in front of other racing girls that I wasn't even trying, that I wasn't even running. It was so humiliating. All of this from him when he was around, at least. Holy shit, he was good at knowing how to make you feel so small. It was so covert, Ollie. You have no idea how insane I felt, questioning everything about myself and my own reality. Wait, you actually do. This is why we're all here for therapy, right? Well, not therapy, but my opinion. And it really isn't as covert as you think it is. As he's running around the track like a psychopath, that's not covert. That's the narcissist with his mask fully off. When he wasn't fucking Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like I just mentioned, he was always distant towards us, involved in other activities geared towards his hobbies. When he made time for them, he was still there so that we were supervised. He wasn't emotionally involved or actively spend time with us, and when we did do things like road trips and traveling, there was always a weird tone to him and control and to him to try to control the mood. I was always uncomfortable around him, but I didn't know why, because he don't like women. That's why. I couldn't express it as a child, but he was my dad, so I gave in because he was my parent, and I felt like I had to do exactly as he said and be a good kid. I had a few good memories when he actually did spend time with my siblings and I, but that's just what it is, only a few. Needless to say, I felt very confused towards all these patterns of behavior. With his job, he was constantly gone on business and away for days and even months at a time. But his profession wasn't a high-paying one. Looking back as a kid who was wondering why my dad was always away working and had that natural longing most kids have to spend time with their parents, it hurt. But now, looking back as an adult, I'm grateful for that absence now, knowing what kind of malicious person he is. I remember a conversation around 19 where he said he wouldn't trade his experiences for anything in the world, to which I replied, "What about us kids?" To which he replies, "What about you kids?" That cut pretty deep. I still had a lot to learn then. He's just telling... This isn't covert, by the way. There's nothing covert about him. There's nothing covert about him. He's just an overt narcissist. Whenever he was home, the house could be a bit messy at times, but it wasn't anywhere towards an unhealthy level. It was clutter here and there. My mom worked and still works in the medical field and did night shifts to make sure that the bills were paid and that we were fed, so she didn't have time to play homemaker too. We did our chores, so that wasn't out of the question. But it seemed like it was never good enough for him to have the house completely spotless and tidy. I do admit I have great organizational skills and know how to make the inside of a house a good woman's touch, but damn, I learned it just to please him. It was twisted, because he was looking to replace his mommy with his wife and his daughter, who he resented. I would spend hours, it seemed like, just sorting toys into exactly coordinated piles. It was just weird how in order things had to be. He still made comments, though. I think this is when my codependent and people-pleasing behavior began to manifest as a child, getting bullied and socially ostracized at school. Schoolgirls can be pretty mean and aggressive, just different from boys, obviously. for wearing the same clothes because mom didn't have much left over, just trying to pay bills. To class definitely didn't help. He also hated animals. Having the cat seemed to be fine, but if it had an accident or threw up a hairball, and if we didn't spot it in time before he noticed, I definitely got an earful. His indifference towards animals was a huge red flag that popped up even from the beginning. But with school and home in the way, it was when he was around. I always had poor social skills and didn't know how to cope with these comments. You know, the fight or flight feeling of anxiety? I would always freeze. That was my reaction. Like a deer in headlights that makes the fatal decision of pausing during these occurrences. This began to manifest around 7 years old. Middle school was the worst, and knowing what I know now, that's just how it is for everyone. I tried to tell him about the bullying. He didn't care and told me to shrug it off because he didn't like you, because he hated you. He liked you getting bullied. He hates women. It's another guy who hates women. Whatever happened between him and mom, she always tried to keep it away from us behind closed doors like a mature adult, until I guess she had enough and started standing up for herself, which I did start to see too. He would always point it back towards her and say, I was calm on the other end during their arguments on the phone. I knew that wasn't the case. After high school, he wasn't in the picture. I was pretty much independent from him, except when I called, because I was still stupidly begging for a relationship with my own father, and still ended up empty-handed and feeling like a bother every time. Up until around when I decided to go back to college and finish up my degree, I had dropped out after dating a dick who talked down to me just like my dad, you know. I was a girl with daddy issues, but I finally got smart and broke up with him and decided to go back. Well, and that's what I find. The girls with the daddy issues are married, or have daddies, okay, who think like women. That's what causes it. Here's where it gets messy. Eventually I broke up with the jerk in the midst of moving in with my dad and stepfamily to make living expenses easier. Yes, I know now, bad decision. He had remarried a woman. He had remarried to a woman who has a good heart and is not without her own issues that you and I both deal with, but I can just see him manipulating her and turning her against certain family members and making her eat up everything he says. It was just painful to watch. She's not an enabler, though. I could definitely say that. It's more of just seeing this stupid cycle over and over again. She honestly tried to help me through some things that has shown empathy towards me, even though no relationship is perfect, and she just doesn't see it yet. My already severe anxiety began to spiral, and I sank into a depression that eventually, because of constant academic stress, Dad now poking at my weight that I had packed on from already being depressed, saying that I went to Starbucks and drank Frappuccinos every day of the week, which isn't true, and that my lifestyle of college kids living beyond their expenses would catch up to me. I will admit I wasn't very financially responsible when I was younger. I'm almost 30 now, and I do hold myself accountable now, but with him, he never explained how to manage money properly or practiced it as an example to me when my mother was struggling to feed us and keep us afloat. All he did was criticize more and more and compared me constantly to those rich kids that I did too often come into contact with. And we're spending all of mommy and daddy's money or whoever was funding their college experience. But again, I hold myself accountable now, and I am more responsible now with things like credit and student loans, which I paid off. Another thing he would always hold against me, that I was too scared or something to face them. Also not true. Digressing, sorry, but because of all this stress academically, dealing with Dad's beratement in secret, and dealing with the separate sexual assault of dickhead ex-boyfriend, can of worms and different story altogether, but I have healed and come to terms with his separate abuse. I ended up having a few trips to the psych ward and ended up being misdiagnosed as bipolar, even though I had no manic symptoms. My dad also used this against me, saying that I would be in and out of the psych ward my entire life, and that he was tired of my crap, and that he wanted to spend time with his kids, my half-siblings, even though he had shown me no desire during my own childhood, especially after divorcing my mom. I don't know if it's because I look more like her physically, or if he was just so bitter that he couldn't control her anymore, or just let this shit get under my mom's skin. You go, Mom. But he would always compare me to her, saying I was too competitive and selfish, and that I needed to spend more time helping out, which I did do, although I couldn't for a while. I was trying to have a life apart from him, which I automatically put at level 0 at being a bad person, and it was more fuel for him. Comparisons as ridiculous as the way I spread mayo on bread, like I didn't take the time to spread it out all the way like my housewife grandmother did. Thank you. Thank you. Point proven. He's in love with his mommy. This is what I tell you. He hates his wives. He hates his daughters because he's a son husband in love with his mommy. And I would question his sexuality as well at this point. Here's what you're doing here. You are over-explaining everything. Okay? And this is a symptom of being constantly criticized. You're going into way too much detail at this point. I'm sure you've heard this before. I'm sure you've probably been told you talk too much, right? This is a symptom of being raised like this. Okay? Being raised by somebody who hates you. This is what happens. I didn't take time to spread it on all the way like my housewife grandmother did, and I did it sloppy like Mom, which she isn't, or at least in the way he makes it seem. Thank you. You and your mother are not like his mommy. That's what this is all about. Period. That's what this is all about. Like, that shit doesn't matter, Ollie, and the cycles of trying to explain myself and that I'm not a selfish person, the good jobs I work to involve. See, here you go. You're over-explaining everything. Everything. Which is definitely not involves youth and special needs, which is definitely not something a truly selfish person like him could handle. This is the kind of job where your heart has to be in it to do it every day. I would also be dealing with other things and pretended to care and listen when he felt like it. And then, this is what I'm thinking, would turn around and say things that made me appear irresponsible. I heard the irresponsible remarks from my stepmother, and she believed, which made me put two and two together, finally was so sneaky about this stuff. And I guarantee you, your stepmother's not that different from your mother, because he needs women he can control in his life. That's what he does. I also knew not to get into drugs and alcohol and wasn't really exposed to it even in college. I didn't party much, so I knew not to mask my pain with those. I knew I had a long road ahead and to truly deal with this baggage from him. After my grandmother oh shit, your grandmother died, here comes the spiral. Mommy's dead. After grandmother died, he went off the deep end. Like, holy crap, Ollie. He threatened my stepmom with divorce. They're still together, but I'm not sure what side of his story that he told her, as long as everyone else in the family that he's still in contact with is getting abused or mistreated. I really don't care, not my circus of monkeys. So she, very rightly so, took a breath from him, but it was in my last semester of college, so I reluctantly agreed to care for the house and the pets while she dealt with this. He was gone for a bit, came back, and I'm still healing from this. Would not stop screaming. And then he got quiet and calm and seemed normal, and then he got right back to it. I couldn't handle it. He let me work again for a few months and left a mess for me to clean. I finally stood my ground and refused to clean it up. more berating came, but I now knew that this covert behavior and being the child of blame my entire life was a point, wasn't normal, to a point wasn't normal or healthy. So many does here. Yes, I know. Yeah, obviously. Because now his mommy's dead. Now he has to replace his mommy. Now he has to replace his mommy. To condense the rest of the story up till now, I graduated college. He was away and only sent a text with everyone else who supported me in attendance. I graduated with my foreign language degree off to pay my loans. Remember, one of his attacks against me. Met my current husband from this said country who, despite cultural nuances, has shown me true compassion and healthiness in a relationship and is helping me heal. My in-laws are wonderful and like learning about American culture where I grew up, which is something during all this that I can only dream of. I was never able to go to this country of interest because of my family's financial hardship, even just as an exchange student because of airfare alone at the time. I cut that off completely, but I had to cut. Yeah, you're lucky I didn't read that. I read these cold, and I tell you guys, don't put stuff in there you don't want read in here. I cut off dad completely, but I also had to cut my stepmom and the rest of that part of the family out, which I'm still dealing with to an extent. But most of the self-induced and learned patterns of guilt are gone. That was more painful than cutting them off. With him, it was just feeding more use. It was just more feeling more used. I'm sorry. With him, it was just feeling more used and exploited and having to waste so much energy on wanting to have a relationship with my own dad. I went through therapy, which according to my therapist and psychiatrist that knew which questions to ask and to properly diagnose. I thank God every day for these two. I really could only label me with trauma. She thought BPD or Asperger's because of a family member with autism, but saw that I was doing the work and going to therapy and doing everything I possibly could to deal with my emotional outbursts and panic attacks after the stuff with dad screaming at me. So we were just treated it as a trauma during medication adjustments. The rest of my family that has been incredibly supportive and knows my dad's bullshit thinks this is PTSD, although it wasn't properly diagnosed because I moved during the middle of this. I still keep my social anxiety in check every single day, but I practice mindfulness and meditation. I need to meditate more, though. It has helped tremendously. Every day is work, but I made it. Ollie. No contact feels like a vacation, and yet it was honestly the only solution and smart decision to my misery from him. I had to be smart like my own mother. She didn't understand these outbursts until I started telling her everything that had happened over the years. I had a little bit of anger towards her, but she also didn't know that he was doing the same thing towards me until she saw my confidence drop and finally put the pieces together after all the hospital visits. She drove hours to see me now, and that I look back at it. She apologized and said she was sorry she ever married him. She won't admit it, but I think she is dealing with guilt that if I had said something sooner, I would really question how much your mother actually knew. Listen, she can feign ignorance all she wants. Okay, and yeah, she gets credit for getting you out of there. But don't think she had no idea. It wasn't happening. Your father lets his mask slip very easily, i.e. running around the track yelling and screaming at you. He doesn't sound like he can control his emotions all that well, as most more male borderlines cannot. What you and your mother need to understand. Well, let me finish this because we're almost at the end. I knew she would have to put an end to it, and Ollie, I've seen her mama bear a side, and she would have put an end to it. That's why he always tried to make sure she was away and not present during his verbal attacks. My relationship with my mom isn't perfect in terms of personality differences, but we get along better than ever, and she has become more understanding and patient of all this. I've also apologized towards her where it was due. I can be myself again and pick up these pieces. Thanks for hearing me out. And I hope that my story can help those who are still stuck. For me, again, no contact was my only solution. To those who are still stuck, you need a support system. It is crucial. Keep listening to Ollie or go online if you can afford it. But you need the support of others, even if it's a stranger in a comment section. You can do it. I believe you guys. Anonymous. So, what you need to understand, Anonymous, is that your father hates women. Because your grandmother probably emasculated him. That's what he wanted. The son husband. And that's what he was. That's what your dad was. When your dad's the son husband, all he wants is his mommy. Not you. Because he hates women. And he wants to see you. He thinks like a woman. He thinks like a woman. He wants to sabotage you like a woman tries to sabotage another woman. Why? Because nobody's his mommy. That's why. So, I hope that helps. Thank you for your contribution and your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been The Narcissistic Resistance.